Hey all, today we'll be seeing about sample size determination in this video. It also comes under research methodology. For people who have not seen sampling, you can go to my previous video which is on sampling, and that describes about the basics and fundamentals of sampling, plus it also talks about the types of sampling, probability sampling and non-probability sampling. In this video we'll be seeing about how do we determine sample size. And before determining or calculating sample size, we need to know about certain things. First is population size. Population size, do we know how much is the actual population that we are going to take for our study? Is it known or unknown? Second thing we need to know about is the confidence level. Third is on standard error, and fourth is on margin of error. We'll be seeing about this in detail. So as I told you earlier, population size talks about all the people who can take our study. And do we know how much population we have or we don't know? If we know it, we call it finite, and if we do not know it, we call it infinite population, because we are not able to understand or make out the size of the population. And this confidence level. Confidence level, it talks about the percentage of all possible samples that can be expected to include the true population parameter. That means you're talking about how much your sample is representative of the population. And normally in research studies, we keep confidence level at 91 percentage, 95 percentage, or 99 percentage. And when you talk about confidence level, that is, there is another thing that you need to know, that is level of significance. If our confidence level is 91 percentage, our level of significance is 9 percentage or 0.09. And if our confidence level is 95 percentage, we have our level of significance as 5 percentage or 0.05. And if our confidence level is 99 percentage, our level of significance is 1 percentage or 0.01. Okay, so confidence level, it tells about how much our sample is representative of the population. Does it actually show what exactly the population is all about? Next we'll see about standard error. Standard error is the standard deviation of sampling distribution, how much it deviates from the mean. As you all know, we always have a normal curve. In the normal curve, we have mean in the middle, and how much the actual statistics or the sample distribution, it deviates from the mean, that is what you call it as standard deviation. And that standard deviation is actually called as the standard. Next is margin of error. Margin of error talks about the difference between true population parameter and sample estimate of that parameter. Um, it actually tells you how much difference is seen between sample and pop. Okay, for more details on standard of error, margin of error, confidence interval, you can see this slide. Okay, when we are thinking of determining sample size, it is based on certain parameters. We'll be seeing about them. First is, it is based on the universe. In other words, you call universe as the population. And if you have a homogeneous population, that is, the characteristics of different elements in the population are equal or same, taking a small sample will help. But if your population or universe is heterogeneous, large sample will only be sufficient. Second thing that you need to see is number of classes or groups or subgroups. How many groups can be divided in that particular thing? Here we can use stratified sampling or cluster sampling. So if there are many groups, large sample will work out, because there will be many characteristics or more differences in that particular uh, universe. Okay, and third is nature of study. How are you going to do that study? Is it going to be one time study, or is it going to be a longitudinal study? If it is a longitudinal study, that is, you're doing it uh, same sample, different time periods, you're going to do it. Then taking a small sample will help. And if it is a general study, large sample will help. And general study will actually take place once in a time. Okay. And then you talk about technical study. In technical study, we can do it for a small sample. And type of sampling, how much which type of sampling are we going to use? And if it is a random sample, small sample size is fine, because we are taking it randomly and we do not have bias included in that particular sample. A researcher does not have any influence on picking out samples. So if it is a random sample, small size is enough. Next thing that you need to see is standard of accuracy or acceptable confidence level. If we need to have more accuracy, then we go in for a large sample. As we saw in the earlier video, if you have large sample, representation of the population will be high, and you can reduce the sampling error, so that will increase the accuracy and confidence level of your study. Next is availability of finance. So anything that we need to do, you need to budget it. So is it possible for me to do it with the current budget that I have, or how much finance or money that I have? If it is there, then we can proceed further. But if it is not there, we need to allocate or find samples that are within our limits. There are other consideration also. First is nature of units. What kind of units are we going to study? What are the characteristics of the elements of the population? Then you talk about the size of the population. Is it large or is it small? If it is small, you can take everybody. If it is large, you go in for sampling. And then you talk about size of the questionnaire. How many questions do you have in your questionnaire? Uh, that also depend decides on the sample size, because in certain cases nowadays you find, based on the variables and based on questions, you talk about the number of samples that you take for your study. And next you talk about is the availability of trained investigators. If you have limited number of people, you can only meet limited number of people. Based on that, you can multiply how many samples you can actually get. Then you talk about the conditions under which the sample is being conducted. Okay, so under what conditions are we taking? Does that condition recur often, or does it happen only for some period of time? All that you see, and that also decides on the sample size. And last you talk about is the time available for completion of study. Earlier we saw about money, now we are seeing about time. So, how much time do I have for my study? I may have big ambitions, but if my time is limited, I need to see what I can do within that particular period of time, and based on that, I can proceed. Okay, so now we have seen what are all the things that are to be seen before I choose a size of sample. And now we'll see about the formulas that are available for us to calculate sample size. So first is, when estimating a mean, you have two formulas. First is when the population is infinite. Okay, when the population is infinite, we have three things that you see in the formula. Always small n determines the size of sample. Then you talk about z, that you see z values in the table, and then you have standard deviation of the population. How do we estimate standard deviation of the population? We can see past studies that are there, or we would have done a pilot study or trial sample. Based on that, you can take the standard deviation of the population. And E is acceptable error. How much precision do you want your study to have? Based on that, also you can have your sample size. So when you have population which is infinite, you use this formula, n equal to z square into standard deviation square divided by error square. Next is calculating sample size when estimating a mean when the population is finite. Same thing, you have n, z, standard deviation, and error. So in this, the formula varies. small n, that is sample size, equal to z square into population size into standard deviation of population square divided by population size minus 1 into e square, that is error square, plus z square into population standard deviation square. Okay, this is what you use when you are calculating sample size when estimating a mean for a population which is finite. Next, we'll see for calculating sample size when estimating a percentage or proportion. Here also you find two things, that is when population is infinite and when population is finite. P here represents sample proportion or percentage. Q is 1 minus P. You know about Z, and then small n always represents size of the sample. So sample size equal to Z square into P into Q divided by error square. Next, we'll see about calculating sample size when estimating a percentage or proportion when the population is finite. Okay, here small n, that is sample size, equal to z square into p into q into population size divided by error square into population size minus 1 plus z square into p into q. This is how you calculate for population that is finite. We also have another technique, that is Bayesian statistics. Here you have follow certain steps. First is expected value of sample information. How much for every possible sample. Okay, how much size you are taking and how much value you get from that particular sample, that you calculate. And then you find out approximate cost for taking a sample. Each for each sample that you are choosing, you need to find out how much cost it takes for you to include that particular sample, and then you compare both the expected value of sample information and cost of sample, and the difference you call it as expected net gain. Okay, and when you increase the expected net gain, then your sampling size will be useful for your study. This is how you calculate sample size using Bayesian statistics. Nowadays, we don't maximum go based on the formulas that we have. We have various softwares and various things that we use for calculating our sample size. So these are some of the things that are used by researchers for calculating sample size. First is Taro Yamane sample size calculator, or you can go for power and sample size pass software, or RavSoft sample calculator. Power and precision software is also there, where you go in for power analysis. Okay, so these are various softwares that is available. There are many more too, but I've just taken the things that are used mainly for research study. Okay, so these are various softwares that are used. We use Excel also for calculation. We have SPSS for analysis. Okay, for analysis we use those two, but for calculating sample size we use all. Thank you so much for watching.